Theresa May defied Tory rebels today as she warned that Parliament must not be allowed to tie the hands of the government in Brexit negotiations. The Prime Minister moved to reassure Eurosceptics after Remainer MPs insisted she had given them a personal assurance that Parliament would get a «meaningful vote» on any final deal with the Mrs May confirmed that the government would table a fresh amendment to the flagship Brexit bill spelling out how ministers would be «accountable» to MPs and peers. But challenged by Brexiteer Jacob Rees-Mogg at PMQs, Mrs May said she would defend the «separation of powers between the executive and the legislature». She warned, "I cannot countenance Parliament being able to overturn the will of the British people." The Prime Minister avoided further trouble on amendments relating to the customs union as all Tory MPs, with the exception of rebel ringleaders Ken Clarke and Anna Soubry, followed orders. Tory rebels turned up the heat on the Premier earlier, warning she must honour promises to give MPs control over, or they will force her hand. In a clear threat, they made clear they are ready to stage a titanic showdown on the issue where MPs could blow a huge hole in Mrs May's strategy. At PMQs, Mrs May promised, "I have agreed this morning with the Brexit Secretary that we will bring forward an amendment in the Lords." The PM said the government would make sure that the government's hand in negotiations cannot be tied by Parliament and that Parliament could not be allowed to overturn the will of the people to leave the European Union. Downing Street sources said the PM hopes for support from all wings of the party after the new amendment is published tomorrow. The spat escalated after hours of bewildering machinations in the Commons that saw Tory backbenchers claim to have secure concessions on a key amendment to the Brexit bill, only for government sources to deny backing down. The government spent most of yesterday engaged in a desperate effort to defeat Lords' plans for a «meaningful vote» on a future Brexit package. Remainer Minister Philip Lee dramatically resigned in protest at Mrs May's stance, saying he could no longer look his children in the eye and stay in his job. Eventually the PM survived the battle, the most difficult in a marathon two-day Commons debate on 15 changes made by the Upper House to flagship Brexit laws, overturning the change by a margin of 324 to 298. But it appears the face-off has only been delayed. Amid acrimony over claims of concessions to rebel ringleader Dominic Grieve, the ex-minister looked to have enough support to inflict a humiliating defeat on the government over Brexit. To head off disaster last night, Solicitor General Robert Buckland appeared to agree Mr Grieve's call for a Commons vote if the government decides to walk away from talks without a deal or if there is no deal by November 30. He said ministers would discuss a third demand from Mr Grieve that MPs should be allowed take charge of the negotiation if there is still no deal in February. Jubilant rebels claimed it meant a no-deal Brexit will be impossible without a Commons vote, a position that enraged Brexiteers. But government sources insisted to Mail Online the only agreement is to keep talking, adding that no concessions sorted at all. And Mr Buckland told the BBC Today, "I have a problem, both constitutionally and politically, with the concept of a direction being given by Parliament. That's very much the end part of Dominic Grieve's proposed amendment. I don't think that's the right way for Parliament to conduct itself. It's certainly not the right way for the British government to be conducting itself in negotiations. Looking at it from the point of view of the Europeans, I think it's very important to remember that we mustn't tie the hands of the government in these all-important negotiations." Former Cabinet Minister Nicky Morgan said she did not believe the group had been played by the PM. "It was the Prime Minister's personal assurance that was very important to us," she told BBC Radio 4's Today programme. "And she has given us that, and those discussions on how we are going to build on the amendment that has been approved by the House of Commons will start today." Obviously, members of the House of Lords would also have the opportunity to put down a further amendment in relation to this. "I think there are a group of us who feel very strongly that Parliament must have a real say in all circumstances." Another Rebel MP, Sarah Wollaston, said the issue would be brought back to the Commons whether the government wanted it or not. For avoidance of any doubt, the promised further amendment in the Lords must closely reflect Dominic Grieve's amendment, she said.